Are you spending hours on aim trainers, deathmatch, the range, and still not climbing? You've probably watched many videos on aim and crosshair placement out there, but still no results. As someone who's coached hundreds of players to Immortal and Radiant, I'm here to tell you that your aim is not the issue. And if you just target the symptoms, you'll never climb in rank. In this video, I'll show you the actual root causes of your aim looking like the problem and help you instantly fix what's holding you back. The first sign that your aim is not the issue is that people kill you fast, like really fast. We've all played those games where you die so fast that it feels like the enemies are smurfing. And if this happens often to you, it's likely not your mechanics that are holding you back, but the way in which you approach a fight. How fast you die in a fight isn't always determined directly by your mechanics. Good mechanics are often a result of other factors, such as your enemy's expectation for a fight or the amount of pressure being applied to that enemy. This can directly impact how much time you have to aim accurately and ultimately win the gunfight. So to get us started, it really helps to understand when the enemy is ready for you and how you can make a situation more difficult for an enemy mechanically. What matters is being aware of the enemy's expectation of your position and taking the fight at the right moment. If you're instantly getting tapped every time you peek a corner, it's likely because you aren't applying enough pressure before you fight. What most people refer to as pressure is simply putting the enemy in a position where they have too many things to pay attention to. Usually the easiest way to apply pressure to enemies is by using effective utility. If the enemy has a Sova dart nearby, they'll become distracted by it and struggle to engage in the gunfight. So how can we get a good timing on the enemy? This part is all about paying attention to cues, specifically the utility that our teammates are about to throw. An example of a cue would be Sova charging up his arrow next to a choke point as your team is preparing to execute. Sova's arrow or other initiator utility such as a KO knife often confirms your team's aggressive commitment to a site or area of the map. Another example might be your Reyna walking close up to a smoke and pulling out her flash. She's signaling that she's ready to commit to an entry. If you can look for these cues by paying attention to your teammates' movement and animations, you'll know when the enemy will feel the most pressure, and that's also when you can peek with perfect timing to secure a free kill. Looking for cues helps us anticipate what will happen and helps us reduce the time between a flash and a peek or a peek and a trade, and this makes the situation more mechanically difficult for your opponent. Therefore, you'll avoid dying instantly and get more kills without needing to fix your aim. And if you can look for these cues successfully, it's far more fluid than just communication alone. And if you can do this correctly, you're on your way to understanding pressure. Now, while I can give tips like looking for cues, to really know what's holding you back individually, we need to have a deeper look at your gameplay. And that's why coaching can be so useful. If you're tired of being hard stuck in low elo, or you want to compete at the highest level, like our student TMS who hit Radiant and Zay who hit 900 RR Radiant in EU, then the Immortal Roadmap program is the perfect fit for you. IRP is for serious players like you who want hands-on help from world-class coaches to perfect their gameplay. We offer a 500 RR in 10 weeks or your money back guarantee. So if you're tired of feeling lost in your games and you're trying to reach your dream rank, use the link below to book a free call with me or one of our coaches to see if you'd be a good fit. Now, it would be wrong to discuss the concept of pressure without considering its macro level implications as well. In other words, how much we're pressuring the enemy with our map control and our teammates' position on a wider scale. This part is more about pressuring the enemy into making decisions. For example, a mid take on ascent would apply macro pressure to the B players. This is because we're taking space from the enemy team and opening the B players up to more positions. Now, the pressure is on the defenders on B site to make a move because their position is now unfavorable. But how does this relate to your mechanic? Well, if you aren't waiting for this pressure before you take a fight, they may still be in their chosen comfortable setup from the start of the round. And this makes it much easier for the B defenders to focus purely on winning their duels rather than having to make decisions and repositioning. So it doesn't matter if you can flick better than Kayn Zera or because the fight isn't mechanically challenging for your opponent. You're not leveraging the pressure you can add with your teammate's position. Now, what if you understand this idea, but you're having trouble applying it in your ranked games? My best advice for understanding when pressure is being applied on a macro level is to look for the events on the map that gets people's attention. For example, a Reyna flash, kill on the map, a drone to take space with, or a rotating door that's been activated. Usually, things that show up on the map have a bigger impact on how people move. So by paying attention to these cues, you'll be able to notice when the enemy is likely distracted by other inputs such as utilities or your teammates making noise, and you'll be able to take advantage of those windows of opportunity to get free, impactful kills. So now that we understand that if we're dying too fast, it could be a timing or pressure issue and not a problem with our aim. But if you're not struggling with this, what are the other two signs that your aim isn't the issue? Well, the second sign your aim isn't the issue is the fact that you get traded way too often, meaning you get a kill, but you often instantly die from someone else. If you've got a few hundred hours on Valorant, you probably understand the concept of trades. The enemy kills your teammate and you trade back the kill. The thing is, a good trade frag doesn't care about your mechanics. If your position is vulnerable to a trade, You're relying on miracles for a positive outcome. Trading is a core and fundamental part of the game, and that's why we need to learn how to mitigate it. To understand and mitigate enemy team trades on your team, it helps to differentiate between defensive and aggressive positions, as both have their differences. If you're playing in a defensive position, you're usually looking to provide the maximum cost to the opponents trying to take the area of the map. For example, when playing on A Heaven, we want to prevent opponents from going long in sewers without giving them a chance to be killed or forcing them to spend valuable resources to secure that space. So we have to fight for it, and naturally, the opponents will want to trade any fight that happens there. So to help you avoid these trades, it's absolutely critical to have a planned fallback in your head. Now, this does not have to be complicated. It could be as simple as an Omen TP away followed by a smoke and some concise info, or just a KO flash after your first fight. But Valorant moves fast, so you must use the buy phase to think through these scenarios so that you don't hesitate. The longer you hesitate, the more time you give to the opponents to punish you for trying to hold that position. And when planning your next move, it helps to remember that we don't need to hold the position at all costs, just at some cost. If you can balance this risk versus reward calculation, you can manage your fights better, and mechanics aren't going to be as much of a deciding factor. Now, what happens when we flip the roles? We're the ones taking the space and attacking. How can we ensure that we secure trades and avoid being traded without relying solely on our aim? To get trades, we need to pay attention to our teammates' movements and intentions so we can position ourselves to fight the same enemy at the same time. Remember that trading is a skill in and of itself that must be practiced and learned over time. It's about predicting movements and simple communication. Generally, being close to a teammate helps you trade well. You usually want to aim for about a 1 or 2 footsteps gap between you and your teammate. And this applies when aggressively fighting or holding together in a high-low or similar setup. To do this, you have to hone in on your communication. Simple calls such as wait up Omen when you notice a cue that your teammate is about to fight can turn 1v1s into perfect trades or 2v1s. And likewise, when the roles are reversed, you should always be aware of your teammates spacing to you when you take fights. Do you really need to fight now? Or should you wait just 1 or 2 extra seconds for your teammates to show up and get closer? Similarly, in this situation, high elo players will often make simple, short 1 or 2 word comms, such as saying come KO to their nearest teammate before taking a fight. These are quick and easy to understand so they don't clog up your comms for the whole team. To take this a step further, always try to say the name of the agent you're communicating this with, such as wait up Omen. You'd be surprised how much important communication is lost simply because people don't know that you're talking to them. Now, learning how to trade a teammate is key, but what if we want to avoid being traded out ourselves? To avoid being easily traded, you need explosiveness. We can think of explosiveness as a time between your enemy team knowing a play is coming and that play being actually executed. For example, you're setting up to go A on a set, but your teammate throws his smokes too early. This will compromise your team's explosiveness. And the reason this is so important for you to understand is that a lack of explosiveness opens you up to trades. And here's why. When you telegraph your team's moves preemptively, you're giving time for the enemy team to rotate and support to come in. You probably understand this, but here's where most people go wrong. The most common mistakes I see in ranked are always during the mid round, between that 1 minute 20 second to 40 second time frame, when everything slows down and you become readable. This is when the defenders start searching for information and pushing. And at the same time, your teammates make small mistakes like making footsteps and revealing their position before their teammates are ready to actually execute. And this leads to a clearer picture for the defenders to anticipate you guys. This results in stacked sites, flanks, and more trades, which leaves you in a mechanically impossible position. So act quickly and remember that communication is key. Now, even if you've nailed explosiveness and you're reading the right cues, what really separates average players from great ones is what you do after the fight. And that's why the third sign that your aim might not be the issue is dying after you've made a good play. For example, if you tap an enemy and reveal your position in defense, you might die later on without even realizing what you did wrong. And you might blame your aim, while in reality, it's the last thing you should be thinking about. Aim is most likely not the problem here. If you notice you don't make quick decisions during or after gunfights, then your 2 hours of aim training isn't going to help you climb on its own. This is where repositioning comes in. Repositioning keeps you unpredictable and helps you act fast. This means you aren't having to hit highlight clips 24/7 just to have a positive outcome in a round. You can think of it as spreading your impact across an entire round rather than trying to take it just from one single play. So let's break down how and what your reaction reaction should be after making an impact play. So to understand what makes a good reposition, we need to learn how to plan ahead. We talked about planning our decisions in advance when we talked about how to avoid getting traded out. And as you could imagine, if we plan our decisions in advance, it's easier to focus just purely on our mechanics in the immediate present. Let's take this example of Jing pulling off this new satchel play in VCT. Before he makes this play, he's likely considering the outcomes and how this will influence his next move. If Jing goes up and sees nothing, he'll likely not scale without waiting for his team, as he doesn't want to fly into a sentinel setup alone. If he gets one kill and there's an additional C player, then he may start to scale up with some utility and apply pressure to the C player. Scaling up and applying pressure should cause some rotations to allow for lurks and timings from his teammates all around the map. But in this clip, he's going to speed up and take space as it's the best outcome possible, and he has a whole site. The key is knowing what you'll do immediately after play so that you don't hesitate. This is a skill that is separate from your mechanics but leads to easier fights. So to do this well, we must develop a decision tree. A good way to develop a decision tree is to go into a custom and think through the most likely scenarios for each opening play that you like to do. Then build on that play by adding contingencies. Do this until you're absolutely sure you know what to do with each outcome. So that's a good example for the attack side. But when we think of repositioning, we mostly think of defensive situations. In this case, we want to ask ourselves some questions. What is the enemy's intention? Is the enemy trying to take this space or not? A sign of the enemy's intention would be investing important utilities such as a drone, an ultimate, or smokes. Our decision on whether and how we reposition after our initial play will depend on the enemy's intention. Here's an example of what I mean. In these two clips of Izu in T1's VCT games, we see two different decision paths and reactions for the same exact play in the same half. Izu's decisions are contingent on whether or not the attackers decide to fight for A control. In the first clip at 9-7, he's met with an A take where he goes for one and gets out. After that, he places his TP and reaggresses to get the maximum amount of shots and impact before he's forced into a retake. However, in the same play, a few rounds later, he's met with less resistance, and so he decides to walk up and hold a deep anchor position. And this allows his team to rotate and stack the other sites. And he's probably thinking in his head that if the enemies do come back A, he'll likely make a similar play as before, where he'll do another staggered fallback. Both times, he wanted to go for the same aggressive A play, but was met with different scenarios. Had he not been ready for both, it would have almost certainly led to mistakes, as there's no time for hesitation at this level. By doing this, Izu is allowing himself more room throughout the entire round to find impact, rather than going all in on one play at the start of the round. Focusing on pressure, cues, trades, and post plays is a key to becoming a consistent carry player in rank, as you can't always simply rely on your mechanics for big plays all the time. Remember that being too greedy is often the enemy of playing consistently. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to watch this other GameSense video that we made. Thanks for watching.